Nostalgia is a powerful feeling. It makes us hold on to the things we love, even if they may be old. What's going on, my fellow Raiders, Doomers, Crusaders, Scullies, Fivers, and Whip enthusiasts out there? It's me, Russell. I run the Rusty Bullwhip YouTube channel, and today's review is not going to be on a normal whip. I've reviewed a lot of cool whips on this channel from a lot of amazing whip makers, but I think it's high time that I reviewed the whip that started it all. So as I sit here in my bed, I'll tell you guys a story. So let's go back about to the year 2018, and that was when I picked up a whip for the very first time. I was still working on an Indiana Jones costume in high school, and I wanted something more than a cheap Party City costume whip. I wanted something real. But after researching whips, I realized that they were very expensive, and I was also kind of scared that I would hit myself with a whip if I ever got one, but there was just something in me that hungered for it. I wanted a real whip for my costume. So my dad searched high and low until he found one from a seller at a swap meet, and he bought it for $10. And he gave it to me after my 16th birthday as a birthday gift. I loved that whip. It got me through everything. It was a great stress reliever after school when I was having a bad day. I learned all the basic cracks like the cattlemen's and the overhead cracks with it, and it didn't last very long. It did break eventually after a few months, but my dad would constantly repair it and it got shorter over time. But I always loved it, and I'll always have a special place in my heart for that whip. So here's the whip as it is right now in all of its former glory. It's a lot older, a lot shorter, and a lot more beat up than it originally was. But I still love it, and it will stay in my collection till the day that I die. But enough about my story. It's time for us to take a look at Old Faithful. So as always, we're going to start with our heel knot, if we can even call this one that. The heel knot is a wrapped ball of leather. It used to have some form of plaiting, but it came loose, and my dad just wrapped it up and put a staple to fasten it down, and it still held up really well, and you can kind of see the sticky tack under the leather where it's holding it together. Very crude, I know. And going into the handle actually isn't too bad. It's a 4-plait braid. This is a 4-plait whip, so the plaiting is going to be very loose. And the transition knot actually isn't too bad either. It's quite streamlined, surprisingly enough. But this one you can really tell it was a ramshackled piece. These whips were not meant to be constructed like fine kangaroo hide whips. This was a Mexican tourist souvenir whip, I bet. And you can see the 2 staples that are anchoring it in place. And the whole whip has this look of very old and very cruddy, and it looks like it's falling apart. I'm surprised it's held up as long as it has, even with me wrecking it on the concrete, which is something I wouldn't recommend you doing. And we're getting into the braiding now. The transition zone is very loose and it droops a lot. So another telltale sign of a whip that is not particularly good for beginners or any enthusiasts. This is very much a decoration piece to have, and I'm surprised that I even learned anything off of it. Very loose 4-plait plaiting, very dry leather. This hasn't been conditioned in years. And it's not very fun to look at. You can see the gaps in the plaiting, and I'm sorry to be talking so negatively about a nostalgic piece, but I have to call this out for what it is. It's just not a good whip. But it's still nostalgic to me, so that's what counts. And some positives about this whip are the color. I like the color a lot. It's a solid black color, and I bet if I darkened this a little more with some dye, it would probably hide a lot of the imperfections. And speaking of imperfections, again, here we go back to that tapering. That tapering is very loose. It doesn't really taper. It starts thin and it stays basically the same width the entire time, so that is going to make the sound disperse very awkwardly. And look at that fall hitch. That's just wrapped up leather and glued over with some rubber sealant, and that fall is just gone. I attached some paracord and a new cracker on the end to just help it crack a little easier. But overall, this whip has seen its days, and it was already falling apart when my dad bought it originally. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but this whip was originally a 6-foot whip, and it's been shortened down to at least a 5-footer now from all the repairs. And you can really see how ugly the inside is. Just look at that. You can see the rope core inside. If I were you, I would suggest getting a whip from a well-known whip maker with a name behind them and a brand. As always, I appreciate you guys watching this video, and I'm gonna go outside and crack this whip now, but hopefully it's not gonna fall apart because it's so old.